I never thought the quietest morning on my farm would end with a woman in designer sunglasses calling 911 because I told her she could not steal my pasture. I definitely never thought I would have to arrest the president of a homeowners association on my own gravel driveway. But that is exactly what happened the day Malavos decided the land my family had worked for 40 years was nothing more than unused scenery for her neighborhood brochure. My name is Cole Mercer, and I own a small apple and goat farm outside Briar Hollow, Tennessee, beside a new subdivision called Willow Crest. Most mornings begin the same way: coffee and a dented blue thermos, mud on my boots, a fence that needs mending, and some goat yelling because breakfast is apparently a federal emergency. Willow Crest was built 3 years earlier on what used to be the Callahan hayfield, and from the minute the first brick house went up, I knew I was going to have trouble. Not with everybody. Plenty of folks were decent. They bought eggs at my stand, waved when they drove past, and taught their kids not to climb fences. But there were always a few who wanted country living without any country in it. They complained when my tractor started before 8, complained when the wind carried the smell of goats their way, complained that roosters had no respect for neighborhood quiet hours. Then there was Marla. Marla Voss wore pastel blazers like armor and spoke in that polished voice people use when they are trying to sound helpful while reaching for your wallet. She was president of the Willow Crest HOA, which in her mind was apparently one step below the governor and one step above God. The first time we met, she came to my farm stand and asked whether I offered a community discount because her neighborhood increased the value of my business. I told her my hens had never attended an HOA meeting, so they had not voted on discounted eggs. She did not laugh. A year later, Willow Crest sent me a proposal for a walking path along my western pasture, a picnic area by my orchard, and a little community garden in a corner they described as underutilized. That corner held my irrigation shed, 3 bee boxes, and a line of young heirloom apple trees I had grafted myself. I replied with 2 sentences: "No, and stay off my property." After that, the letters got sharper. Then came complaints about livestock, fencing, and a barn roof that could barely see from the road. I saved everyone in a folder marked Willow Crest Nonsense, mostly because I have a sense of humor, and partly because I have spent enough years working in county law enforcement to know paper trails matter. I had been sheriff of Briar Hollow County for 6 years, but on the farm I tried not to think like a sheriff. Out there, I was just Cole, a man fixing what weather broke and trying to keep the goats from eating something expensive. That morning I was replacing a loose fence post in the north pasture when I heard tires tearing down the gravel drive faster than any sensible person would drive on a farm. I looked up, and a white SUV blew past 3 private property signs, through the open gate, and straight toward me. I remember setting my hammer down slowly, because before Marla even rolled down her window, I knew my peaceful morning was already over. Marla rolled down the window just far enough for me to see the edge of her smile, the kind of smile that does not mean hello so much as it means you are about to regret disagreeing with me. She had a travel mug in one hand, her phone in the other, and she looked irritated that I was standing in the way of her little expedition. "Cole," she said, like we were neighbors catching up at a church picnic, "you really need to move your truck later. This access lane is going to be important once the trail project gets approved." I looked past her, out toward the pasture, then back at her. "What trail project?" She sighed, long and slow, like I had just asked her why the sky was blue. "The Willow Crest Recreation Trail. We are assessing the route today. The board agreed your north pasture is the most practical connection point." For a second, I honestly thought she was joking. Then I saw the folded map sitting on her passenger seat, all neat little colored lines crossing over my orchard, my fencing, my goat pens, my irrigation ditch, and the patch of ground where my father used to park his old red Ford tractor. Something in my chest tightened. Not anger exactly. Anger comes quick and burns hot. This was colder than that. It was the feeling you get when someone walks into your house, opens your refrigerator, and starts deciding what furniture they are taking home. "Marla," I said, keeping my voice level, "that land is not part of Willow Crest. It never has been. It never will be. Turn around and leave." She pushed open her SUV door and stepped out onto the gravel in a pair of spotless cream boots that had clearly never met mud before. Her blazer was pale pink. Her sunglasses were big enough to reflect the whole pasture, and there was not 1 second of hesitation in her face. "You are being very short-sighted," she said. "The community needs outdoor access. Families need a safe place to walk. children need recreation space. We cannot just let all this land sit here doing nothing. I glanced toward the goats who were watching her from the fence line with the same expression they usually reserved for a bucket of feed. It is not doing nothing, I said. It is a farm. It is an eyesore, she snapped, and that was the first honest thing she had said all morning. There it was. Not community, not children, not trails. She did not see my farm as a home or a business or a piece of ground that had kept 3 generations of my family afloat. She saw it as an inconvenience sitting beside her polished neighborhood, something old and messy that made her perfect little subdivision look less perfect. I had seen that kind of thinking before, not just as a landowner, but as sheriff. People convince themselves they are doing something noble, then use that story to justify whatever they want to take. I stepped closer, not threatening, just firm enough that she understood I was done discussing it. You need to get back in your vehicle and leave now. Marla gave a short laugh. Cole, you are acting like this is some kind of private kingdom. It is private property. The HOA has authority over this area. No, it has authority over the houses in your development, and even that is questionable depending on who you ask. Her mouth tightened. I am the president of Willow Crest. Congratulations. I can make this difficult for you. You already have. She stared at me for a moment, probably waiting for me to soften. Maybe apologize, maybe remember all the letters and complaints she had sent and realize she had more ways to make my life miserable. But I had spent years dealing with people who confused pressure with power. I was not impressed by a title printed on a laminated badge. Marla turned away from me and started walking toward the pasture gate. I am going to inspect the site, she said over her shoulder. You can cooperate now, or you can explain later why you interfered with an official HOA project. I moved in front of her before she reached the gate. You take one more step past this fence, and you are trespassing. Her expression changed then. The smile disappeared. Her face hardened. You do not get to talk to me like that. I just did. Do you know how much influence I have in this county? Probably less than you think. I can report you. I can shut down your farm stand. I can make sure every family in Willow Crest knows you are hostile to the community. I can have inspectors crawling all over this place by next week. I did not raise my voice. You can call whoever you want, but first, you are going to leave my land. For 1 second I thought she might finally back down. Her eyes flicked toward the road, then toward the signs, then toward the map on her SUV seat. But people like Marla do not back down when they are embarrassed. They look for someone else to blame. She stepped forward, close enough that I could smell expensive perfume under the morning dust. You are just a farmer, she said quietly. You should be grateful people like us moved out here. We are bringing value to this place. I looked at her, really looked at her, and I felt something settle inside me. Not rage, not fear, just certainty. My family was here before Willow Crest had a logo, Marla. My father built that barn. My mother planted those trees. I raised my son on this land. You do not get to walk in one morning and decide it belongs to you because you want a prettier view from your subdivision. Her jaw clenched. Then, before I could take another breath, she slapped me. It was not a hard slap, not enough to knock me sideways, but it cracked through the quiet morning like a gunshot. The goats scattered. A few birds lifted out of the orchard. My cheek stung, and for a second all I could hear was the wind moving through the grass. Marla took one step back, looking shocked at herself, but the shock did not last. It turned into panic almost immediately. She spun toward her SUV, yanked open the door, and grabbed her phone. You touched me, she yelled. You threatened me. I knew you were dangerous. I kept my hands at my sides. Marla, stop. Do not make this worse. But she was already dialing. She climbed into the SUV, slammed the door, and started backing up so fast that gravel sprayed against the fence posts. Then I heard her voice through the open window, loud and trembling with fake terror. Yes, I need police right away. I am on a farm outside Willow Crest. A violent man attacked me. He's trying to stop me from leaving. I stood there beside the pasture gate rubbing my cheek, watching her lie into the phone, and I will admit something I am not proud of. A part of me wanted to tell her exactly who she had just called, but another part of me, the part that had worn a badge long enough to understand how truth works, decided to let the next few minutes unfold on their own, because Marla Voss had no idea that the violent farmer she was reporting to 911 was the sheriff of Briar Hollow County. And by the time she realized it, there would be nowhere left for her story to hide. My radio crackled less than a minute later. Deputy Nolan Briggs came through sounding confused, trying hard not to laugh. "Sheriff, we have units headed toward your farm. Dispatch says a woman in a white SUV is reporting an assault by a local farmer." I looked across the pasture just as Marla swung her vehicle around too sharply, cut the corner of my fence, and plowed straight through a row of young apple trees I had planted the spring before. I heard wood snap under her tires. Those trees were not decoration. They were part of a project my father and I had talked about before he passed. A hardier strain built for the cold snaps we got in Briar Hollow. Seeing them fold into the mud on that SUV did something to me, but I did not run after her. I took a breath, picked up my radio and said, "Nolan, tell the responding deputies to keep her at the main drive, and do not tell her who I am yet." There was a pause, then he said, "You want the surprise version of this?" "I want the truthful version," I said. "The surprise is just a bonus." By the time I reached the front of the property, Marla had parked sideways across the gravel entrance, waving both arms at Deputies Briggs and Avery like she was directing a rescue helicopter. Her hair was wind-blown, her blazer had dust on the sleeve, and she was pointing toward my farmhouse while telling them I had trapped her, threatened her, and tried to drag her out of her vehicle. The funny part was, she kept getting louder every time the deputies asked a basic question. "He came at me," she shouted. "He blocked me from performing official HOA duties. He assaulted me because he does not respect community authority." Deputy Avery glanced at the crushed saplings, the bent fence, and the deep tire tracks running through my pasture. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "why were you driving across private farmland?" Marla lifted her chin. "Because the HOA has jurisdiction over this entire surrounding area." That was the moment I stepped through the gate. She saw me and pointed so hard I thought she might pull something in her shoulder. "There he is. Arrest him." I walked closer, calm as I could be, even though my cheeks still burned and my trees were lying broken in the dirt behind her. "Before anyone arrests anyone," I said, "why do you not tell the deputies what you were doing on my property?" Marla laughed like I'd asked the dumbest question on earth. "I was inspecting community land for a trail project. I have every right to be here." Deputy Briggs looked at me, then at her, then finally said the one word that changed the temperature in the whole driveway. "Sheriff?" Marla froze. Her eyes moved from his uniform to my face, then down to the band clipped near my belt. For a second, she looked like someone had unplugged her. "You are the sheriff," she whispered. "Yes," I said, "and this is still my land." She tried to recover, but there was nowhere to go with it. The deputies had her on body camera admitting she entered private property for an HOA project. They had the signs, the damage, the tracks, and her false report recorded with dispatch. When I told her she was being detained for trespassing, property damage, filing a false emergency report, and assault, she started screaming about lawyers, board meetings, county politics, anything she could grab onto. But titles do not stop handcuffs from closing, and they do not repair what a person breaks. As Deputy Avery walked her toward the cruiser, Marla looked back at me and said, "You are enjoying this." I looked at the broken trees, then at the farm my family had spent a lifetime protecting. "No," I told her. "I am just tired of people thinking they can take whatever they want as long as they call it community improvement." The court hearing came 2 days later. Marla showed up quieter, without the sunglasses, without the pink blazer, without that little gold HOA pin she wore like a sheriff's star. Her attorney advised her to take responsibility, and for once, she did. She admitted she had crossed a line, then another, until she had convinced herself the line never existed. The judge ordered restitution for the farm damage, community service, a fine for the false report, and barred her from serving in any Willow Crest leadership role for 2 years. Some people in the HOA said the punishment was too harsh. Others said it was not harsh enough, especially after they learned how many complaints Marla had filed against neighbors who had never pushed back. A month later, I found a short note taped to my farm stand. It said, "I was wrong. I am sorry." No signature was needed. I knew who wrote it. I planted new trees where the old ones had been crushed, repaired the fence, and went back to feeding goats before sunrise. Life moved on because farms have a way of demanding that you keep moving too. But I still think about that morning sometimes, and I wonder where the line really is between protecting a community and controlling it. So tell me this, was Marla simply held accountable, or did the court go too far by removing her from HOA leadership? And when someone starts believing their title gives them the right to cross your boundaries, what do you think is the best way to stop them? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Share this story with someone who has dealt with an HOA nightmare, and subscribe for more real-world style stories where arrogance finally meets consequences.